Hey everybody, I think we're ready to start. Ding, ding, ding. Hello folks. Welcome to the first session of Digital Journalism Camp. This is going to be a reenactment of the old dating game. No. This is business for bloggers. And we're just going to talk about some of the common practices to success that some local microhouse publishers have found, as well as what are some of the universal paths to success that small businesses go through. And we're trying to encourage folks to think about their micro publications as sustainable businesses. There's a lot of important work and great work that's being done out there, and ultimately being sustainable through revenue will keep the voices and the diversity of voices out in our community, which is I think part of the mission of Digital Journalism Portland. So I'm Cornelius Swart, and I'm with the Oregonian News Network, which is kind of a collaborative partnership that Abraham mentioned between Oregon Live and a number of local blogs, independent sites, and news sites across the state. And at the far end is Brett Burmeister, who has been eating at food carts in Portland for the last 20 years. In 2008, he joined Lizzie Castron at foodcartsportland.com to take the reins and create resources for street food in the city. Brett and Food Carts Portland have been featured on the Travel Channel, Food Network, Guardian UK, and many local and national publications. Next to him is Jonathan Maas, a former independent PR and marketing consultant. He moved to Portland in 2004 and started Bike Portland a year later. In 2007, he gave up his business and began to blog full-time. In addition to covering bike news, he is also an active member of the community and plays a challenging dual role of journalist and activist. He lives in North Portland with his wife and 3 kids. Next to him is Ken Aaron, who's co-founder and photo editor of neighborhoodnotes.com. Aaron has a degree in business information systems with a minor in computer science. He also has an MBA from Santa Clara University. Most of his business experience was in Silicon Valley, and includes tech support for investment banks in San Francisco, working as a consultant for a consulting firm for software companies, product marketing manager for a modem manufacturer, Global Village, and an executive recruiter for high-tech marketing positions. Carolyn Duncan is a serial entrepreneur and subject matter expert in venture capital and angel investing. She started Portland 10, to create a vehicle where Portland entrepreneurs could learn how to commercialize their projects and increase the quantity of high-growth startups in the state of Oregon. Carolyn has worked in the high-tech startup and angel venture capital networks in Portland, Seattle, Southeast Idaho, and Salt Lake City. So, given the array of experience and expertise that we have on the panel, we're kind of looking at kind of having almost a dual moderator or sort of commentator dynamic go on with practitioners of microhouse publishing and Carolyn as sort of a business consultant, sort of floating above the conversation, so to speak. I myself used to run a community newspaper and daily news blog in North Portland called The Sentinel. So I also had some publishing experience that I might kind of throw in by way of analogy or just kind of clarifying some questions. So starting, in no particular order, maybe with Brett, if you just want to tell me and tell the group how you got started with your project, and so far, what's the biggest business lesson you've learned about your business or about the marketplace?
Well, I got started in blogging back when everybody had a blog in 2000 or 2001. I was talking about how I walked home. And then started with blogging for some other city blogs, Portland Met blogs, Our PDX, and then my business partner, Lizzie Castron, who started Food Carts Portland, recruited me and promptly moved to New Orleans. So I took the reins, and it was one of those moments where it was just like, yes, I want to do this. Because I've been eating at the food carts for 10 years and 20 years, and And it gave me that opportunity to really just kind of do what I wanted to do. And that was also when Portland saw 110% growth in food carts. So there was plenty of opportunity. The one thing I learned was when I dove into it, I really wanted to do things with the site. I really wanted to upgrade the site. I wanted to put this widget in. I wanted to do video. I wanted to have Flash. I wanted to have it reach out and hand you food. But what I realized is I didn't have those skills. I didn't have some of those technical skills. And when I tried to do some of those things, I'd spend 3, 4, 7 hours working on something, and I realized that I could have spent that time writing, and people were coming to the site for what we wrote, for the content. So refocused, and I focused on what people were coming to the site for, and everything else came along. It took us some time to upgrade the site, to get it better, etc. But you know, we grew our readership by 600% since then. So that's what I learned.
Yeah, so I moved here and instantly started looking around the scene in terms of bicycling, because I've always just been a bike person in general, I guess. I've been biking for a long time, ever since I was a kid. So when I moved to Portland, I just started looking around in the scene, and then strangely enough started the Bike Fun blog on OregonLive.com back in 2005, because they sent out an email to some community email list I was on saying they wanted someone to write about bicycling. So I thought, well, I was sort of in the PR biz and communications business, so I knew how to write a little bit. So replied to that, and then just thought it was really cool getting something published online. So did that for just a couple months, and realized that as I started doing that, I realized just sort of jumping in on blogging in general and just learning more about it, and realizing that the tools Oregon Live was giving us to use weren't all that great. So it was kind of like, didn't really need them, so we just started bikeportland.org a few months later. And just sort of, it's just grown from just basically a general personal hobby on the side kind of blog, because I really like bikes. And then just sort of really liked doing it, and people started reading it. I think one of the big, well, we can get to this later, but people started reading it in part because some of the initial headlines would go on the front page of Oregon Live, which was kind of cool. So that was kind of a little wrinkle in how people started learning about it. But yeah, it just kind of grew organically. And then I just sort of accidentally got into like making news, just because I knew so many people, and people started telling me stuff, and I started publishing it, and then things started happening. And I've just been doing that for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years since. In terms of what I've learned about being here is that in my 6th year now is that in business-wise, it takes I think it takes more than just a good brand and a lot of really good content to make a sustainable business. Kind of leave it at that, and we'll get to that later.
Neighborhood Notes was started by the other co-founder, Lynette Fuselier, as a communication vehicle for the Neighborhood Association in Pearl District, where it started out. It really was just a tool to help get the word out. She was involved in the association as communications director, and it was the tool to get the word out. I started helping contribute to it. It was all fun and hobby for both of us. Over time, we noticed the traffic numbers growing. We started getting requests from people outside the neighborhood saying, why don't you write about more things, beyond the Pearl? When we started doing that, the Pearl residents said, what are you doing? This is a Pearl blog. Why is that here? So we realized that there was something more to it. And the traffic numbers were really growing well. We had more readers each month than people who lived in the Pearl. And that's when we decided to really take a look at making it a business, taking it larger than just one neighborhood. And that's really how it started. And in terms of lessons, the biggest lesson, when Cornelius gave us that question this week, Lynette and I started looking at, well, this happened, and that was a good lesson, that happened, that was a good lesson. And really what it came down to is every time we had one of this or that, the real lesson was adaptability and change. You have to be able to look at what's going on, and if it's not working, change it, figure out what is. Pay attention to your readers. What are they asking for? I mean, you've heard that here already. What are they asking for? Adapt to that. And that's really what it comes down to with this, is you have to be willing to make mistakes, learn from your mistakes, don't be afraid of your mistakes, and change.
Great. So, Portland 10 is incubation program for entrepreneurs, and it actually started as a result of my prior experience in publishing and social media, where I comment and write a lot about venture capital and angel investment kind of along the West Coast with the cities that I've been working in. in economic development. And so for me, it's a transition of getting out of blogging and more into being a practitioner in my industry. But the thing that has been a lesson learned for me now, we're now licensing the Portland 10 programming nationally. And the reason is that my experience in social media and using that as a tool to promote what we were doing at Portland 10 attracted attention from so many cities outside of Portland that then came in and asked us if we would license the programming out. And that's been a real asset in driving this next section of the business. So, that's what I would.
All right. So, audience. It's all about the audience. It seems like, the next question was really kind of what did you think about when starting up your business, and just to beat the obvious over everyone's heads, the difference between you and other bloggers is that, you really have proper business models, revenue streams, and you, I think, are in the place that a lot of bloggers would like to take their sites, to move them from something as a hobby or something as a vehicle and make them into, their job. And you guys are kind of living that dream. So, although it may not feel like it sometimes. So, I guess what I would say is, some people think about what they want to write first, and then think about the business model later. Maybe that's everybody. Just real quick, was that the case with each one of you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it was a hobby and a passion. And from there, when people started noticing it, that's when we started thinking about, can it be something more?
Yeah.
And then when did you get to the point, what was actually the traffic point that you reached where you were like, this is commercially viable, or I can start monetizing this audience in some way?
I think for me it was more of a hunch. I just sort of started making an educated decision, or educated guess, I should say, about, a lot of people like this, a lot of people are reading it, it could be the only thing kind of like this, this might make sense, I like doing it, let me just try this. So, I mean, my business really didn't start, I already had about 2 years of skin in the game before it really was a business. So, yeah.
We had some kind of internal ethical challenges moving to an advertising model, because we had grown our readership and etc. But it was like, well, who's going to advertise on Food Carts Portland? Food carts. Well, how do you write about food carts and have an ad for food carts? There's an ethical question that we had there, and so since my business partner was living in New Orleans and she wasn't writing about them, when the food carts would approach us to advertise, I'd send them to Lizzie, and she would manage that relationship because I would be doing the content. And there isn't really a conflict there. We disclose it that we're not a review site. We do profiles. We write your story. We publish your menu. We're not sitting there saying you're good or you're bad. And so, and our first advertisers weren't food carts. They were supplemental businesses to food carts. But that was really one of our earliest challenges, was like taking that leap. And so how we did it was to judge our readership and how to do advertising, was we contacted some nonprofits and said, would you guys like to have an ad up, or some events? And then we were able to use our analytics software to say, wow, people are clicking on these things. That's great.
So events, you mentioned events as...
Just when...
I think we'll bring that up. We're going to bring up that later.
It was more of food carts were going to be at X event. And so we contacted them. We weren't involved with the event, but we contacted them and said, hey, would you guys like to throw up an ad on our site? Because it was for the Oregon Food Bank, whatever. And they're like, yeah. And we realized that ad got amazing amount of clicks, actually more than what my regular ads get now. I shouldn't say that, but it just was like, okay, that convinced us that people won't mind having this extra bit of content sitting over on the left.
So I have maybe a commentary on that in terms of two examples. One is a local interest blog, Color Lovers, if you're familiar with them. So I met the CEO of Color Lovers about 3 years ago, and his challenge was he had built this amazing community. I think they had like 1 million participants in their community, no revenue. It's when I was working in venture capital, and I was like, wow, we would never invest in you, ever, because there's no way for us to generate any return on that. And so, but I recently heard that they had been invested in after, 3 years of effort trying to figure out a business model that would work. So that was a really interesting one, like build the content first and the audience and then eventually figure it out. And the other one that I'm thinking is Chris Pirillo, who's such a hugely known blogger, and him taking his personal expertise in tech and really transforming that into a business. I had lunch with Chris Pirillo a couple years ago in Seattle, and he was such a shark about the business end of what he was doing, and it was really impressive to me how he'd gone after brands to get sponsorships, and then it was right before he landed his gig with CNN, and if you're proactive about the business side of things, I think it can be as accessible, but I think the challenge is that blogging is not, people don't get into it for that reason of this could be financially successful, and it really has to be deliberate. So.
And then Ken?
For us, it really came down to that point I mentioned about where monthly uniques were greater than the population of our neighborhood. That's when we started saying, there is something interesting here. People care about this. And then the added bonus was when people actually started writing us and saying, can you write about something other than the Pearl? Those two things were really what did it for us. So it wasn't, there was a little bit of a numbers thing in there, but again, it was more gut and intuition in terms of, there's a lot of interest here. A lot of people like what we're doing, and that's when we decided that there was something more than just a fun blog.
There's also like the practical matter of like, dang it, I'm working so hard on this, now I'll start making money.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. Yeah.
Now, and this kind of dovetails into, the kind of misconception of, a well-read, like you say, a community site that had 1 million members, a well-read publication equals a successful business. So I used to run the Sentinel, which was a North Portland newspaper, and a website. It was popular, it was influential, it was widely read, and people would say, yeah, it's a great publication, it's widely read, and I closed it last year. So people say, why wasn't it successful? I'm like, well, just because you have an audience doesn't mean you have a business. You need to sell that audience to someone who wants to buy it. And whether that's an advertiser or some other model. And so I wanted to ask you a little bit now about your specific experience with how do you target advertising? How do you monetize your audience?
So we actually haven't targeted anybody. We haven't reached out. That's one of our challenges. Is all of our advertisers have come to us. We have an advertising button on our site, and we get contacted. We send them our rates, and they send us an image, and we put it up on the site. So if we actively went out and started grabbing advertisers, I think we could even do that much better. Talk with beyond the food cart level, the New Seasons, the Whole Foods, different types of companies that actually cater to the food cart. But even beyond just food carts, things that are neighborhood, things that are Portland, Oregon, etc. That's. I forgot the rest of the question.
So you're really not saying, well, this is a natural fit with this business, this industry. I mean, obviously, events and other food carts were what you were seeing.
Well, we got an advertiser who wanted to advertise a link to a porn site. We're like, no. And they wanted to pay us a double because they saw our traffic. I'm like, no.
We promised we weren't
Maybe they
going to
meant
talk
food
about
porn.
porn.
Yeah, well, yeah. But again, it came down to time. I personally don't. I run out of time at the end of the day, and I know, Jonathan, you've expanded staff. You have staff. I don't have staff yet. But I know that other sites, I think PDX Pipeline does it, where there are incentives, and I know Dive Bar or Barfly, they do incentives for advertisers. If you bring us an advertiser, you get 10% or something like that.
So you've never thought through, this is my audience is this age range, they make this amount of money, they have these interests, therefore I'm going to go. You haven't done that.
Well, from that perspective in advertising, no. From that perspective on keeping the content fresh, yes. I know I've learned from my multiple audiences, my Twitter audience, my Facebook audience, and my blog audience, really what I should and shouldn't write about, what gets spikes, what doesn't. You know, you talk, and you're going to love this one. You talk about vegan naked bicyclists, and you're number one on Google. And include a food cart and a picture of something just insanely gastronomic, like a double hamburger between 2 cheeseburgers, and you're then pegged on Serious Eats. There are ways that I've figured out my audience and how to raise my my numbers, but no, I haven't taken that to the next level of how to apply that. How to take those analytics towards the advertisers.
So I started out kind of like Brett in terms of doing everything myself. Someone sends me an image, I tell them how much it costs. I think our first ad was like 20 bucks a month, I mean something silly. And as the site got a larger audience and started to charge more for rates and things got a lot more serious, eventually brought in someone to help me do that, help do that for me. A big part of that was like the editorial advertising thing of like I needed to start having a buffer between me and people that were spending money on the site. So having a staff person to do that makes a lot of sense. And then in terms of really focusing on, I mean, things are getting really serious now in terms of like this business either has to work or I can't do this anymore kind of situation. So we've gotten really serious. I mean, the last couple of months we hired a consultant to come in and help us figure out how to get to all these work plans and budgets and targeting audiences and which priorities we should go for in terms of new types of content and new geographic coverage and stuff like that. So I think it started kind of like Brett, and now it's like at that next phase of like, you know, being more serious about it. And I pay a guy, I think he makes more than me if you really look at the numbers. But yeah, I mean, he's got a one sheet, he goes to a trade show, he talks about the site, tells the story of the audience and the work we do, and you know, we're trying to get higher and higher caliber advertisers as a result.
With us, we started off that like everybody else. We just sort of threw stuff out there, went to neighborhood businesses, people who generally support the community and all that. But as the business grew and we got more serious, we actually did a survey of our readers and asked them very specific demographic information. So we got age ranges, we got income ranges. We asked them on the flip side about content, what do they like? Do they like words? Do they like pictures? Do they like video? So from that, we really could define our audience. And with that, then we know the kinds of businesses that we can target more with advertising. The challenge is, like everybody else, getting out and doing it. We do have a bunch of freelance writers we work with. There's no way to do what we do with just Lynette and I doing the content and everything else on top of it. We recently brought in John Mitchell as our managing editor. So there's the separation of us in many ways from the editorial, so the conflict between editorial and advertising is somewhat buffered. But that's really how we've grown this thing and tried to match our audience to potential advertisers. But one of the things we learned early on was, with this, we really do have, call it almost 2 separate businesses. We're generating content to attract readers, and that then defining that reader base and understanding how it's attractive to what advertisers. And then it's marketing that to the advertisers. So there's really 2 things going on. And I don't think there's a lot of people who just, as you start a blog, you're just doing it for fun. At some point you have to realize that, and there really are 2 audiences that you deal with.
Now, do you guys believe there's a magic number, or is there a number, a traffic number?
I think it's more the value of your brand, more than
the quality of your content.
And then with your advertisers, are you seeing people who are mostly interested in branding? Are they interested in click-throughs and return on investment? And if they are interested in return on investment, what are they really looking for? What kind of return? Like immediate, I'm getting my cost back in 30 days with this ad, or you're out?
We hear everything. Some people ask all kinds of questions up front and then never ask another question after the ad starts running. We get some businesses come at us with, I'm going to run one ad for a month and see if it works. And we kind of just say, well, thanks, but no.
Right, do you reject those?
Yeah, because it's just, we really tell them it's not worth it. It's
Right.
really not worth it for any of us to do that.
And
It's
it
a
can make your
long-term
publication
brand build.
set up for failure.
Yeah.
Because sometimes one ad is just not going to do it.
Yeah.
It takes a couple ads.
Yeah, but it's very much, it is very mixed. We always pitch it much more as it is branding and awareness building for your business rather than click-throughs and driving specific sales to it. And I think if you look at the numbers overall, the average click-through rates now are so low that it really has shifted, that display advertising really has shifted to primarily a branded vehicle. The other side of it, though, with us is the content that we sell, which is the event listings, press release distribution, and sponsored stories, that's something different that businesses are interested in. It's a way for them to get their message out directly to their audience, to their potential customer base. And that's something we're seeing a lot of interest in.
And I'd like to jump into that in just a little bit and just go all the way through the ad.
I guess I consider myself more technologically savvy than my advertisers. I have sent my advertisers their analytics reports, and they're like, "What's this?" So they don't know what a click-through rate is. They don't know these things, and so. But again, how much time do I take to explain that to them after they've already paid me? So I do provide that information ahead of time. I provide our stats, etc. But again, my advertisers are right now kind of transient, meaning they're there for 3 months, maybe 6 months, and then they move on. But then there's usually somebody else coming in behind them. I only have a few advertisers who have been there since the beginning and are still there. And a lot of my advertisers are using the site to do something now, like now being this month, next month, or next 3 months. And for me, that's fine because it keeps things fresh and keeps things, I personally don't like to go into the same page and seeing the exact same thing. So if it moves around. So.
But are they looking for PAL, like, okay, my ad's going up on the 1st, I'm calling you the 2nd if no one shows up coming through the door kind of thing. They expect magic, immediate impact.
Yeah, I get that from 1 or 2 out of 20. Someone who kind of expected something, but again, it's someone who is, uses the caps lock when they send emails. Again, and I'm not trying to be mean, but they're not technically savvy.
About my grandmother now.
And you can figure that out via the emails when they're like pixels. What's that? And it's like, have you talked to my graphic designer? People who still write checks.
There's a lot.
I know.
Does anyone use seminars ever? Offered, done this technique of where you kind of invite a whole bunch of people and just kind of bring them up to speed on what analytics is, what a web ad can do, just to kind of educate folks and also kind of bring them into, here are some of the skills I have. These are some of the things that I do. If you want to take it to a sales conversation, that's the next level. But just, has anyone ever done anything like that? No.
I think it's more on an individual basis.
One-on-one.
Right.
Yeah,
You have to
We've talked about, as we're planning to go out and talk to business associations and all that sort of thing, we've talked about doing some of that stuff, but we haven't done that yet.
Is there a lot, is everybody finding a steep learning curve for their clients? Or, Jonathan?
To a certain extent. Our learning curve is less because, for me, if people start talking about click-throughs and impressions and CPIs, it's like they're kind of maybe not the right kind of partner for us to work with, because for me it really is more about brand presence. And I'm sort of philosophically opposed to the whole CPM thing in general, because it's like, I'm the content creator, I'm not responsible for the quality of your offer, the quality of your product, the quality of your banner image. What if it's just a dumb thing that nobody wants to click on? It's like, that's not my responsibility, Our responsibility is to make really good content that has a lot of impact, gets a lot of really high quality readership. So, that's kind of how I look at it. But we have a huge mix. Because we have such a strong sort of advocacy component, we're thought of as sort of being part of this movement or whatever. There's a lot of people on there that just want to be on there so the site stays there, doesn't go away. And those are kind of like my foundational people that, if I was smart, sort of the next part of my business thing would be going to those people and being like, hey, how do we go sort of beyond a banner ad so you can really make sure we stay here for a long time. But so yeah, there's several people that have been there pretty much since the get-go, and they're kind of like the rock foundation of the whole thing. And hopefully they, nobody's really left yet because we've had to increase the rates over time. But we have a mix. Some people just want to promote a raffle and it's just a quick thing, and they are looking to get a lot of impact. So yeah.
I have a question for you guys, which is, I remember 4 or 5 or 6 years ago, it was such a big deal, like paid blogging or product placement on blogging. And is it just more acceptable now that blogging is a business endeavor and there's that commercial relationship, or do you still get flack from readers about that kind of thing?
We're really open about any sort of sponsored content we do. It says it right in there and right at the top. We haven't had any pushback whatsoever. We're careful about that content to make it something valuable and not too salesy. You know, if it's an event listing, basically, that's their words. And everybody knows an event listing, so we don't worry about those. I'm talking more sponsored stories. It is a promotion for that business. It's disclosed, it's totally transparent, and we make it something valuable and interesting. We have no pushback.
So we had a section and a contract deal at the Sentinel where if you bought an ad contract at a certain length and certain size, you know, I mean, certain repetition, you would get an advertiser spotlight, which was, you know, we would write up your business, and we would not write it up, you know, otherwise. You know, that was a practice that we really maneuvered around very consciously, is that we were not going to talk about businesses, you know, unless it came from, you know, a reporter who just wanted to write up a business. I would not initiate any business profiles. And then if we did do an advertiser spotlight, it would be, you know, clearly labeled advertiser spotlight, because we found that, you know, the impact of those stories was huge for those customers. And, you know, we just had to find a way to make it work as far as the ethics of it. And I think that this is kind of a trend that people are wrestling with, and it's just, you know, it's out there. It's out there in the world, and we all have to deal with it. The media is changing, and, you know, I didn't invent the term content as the new advertising, but I think that we all have to deal with that.
And I think it's like
someone did invent that expression.
And I think it's like a balance too. Like the higher quality product you're creating, and the higher quality and more brand value and credibility and authority your site has, my hunch is that audience in general will be more open to thinking, that guy's got to make that work, because that's some cool stuff there, and that's not doesn't come cheap, you know.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a lot of people contact me and they're like, oh, I really love your site. I want to do the same thing here in Tucson or wherever. How much you charge for advertising? How do you do advertising? I'm like, dude, you're talking about selling your audience before you even have it. Like, it's not going to go well. You got to get some. You got to get some mojo going first, so that people actually care about your stuff. And then if you do approach them and say, hey, you like what you see, I got this guy who wants to pay me to do this thing over here, are you open to that? I think, you know, people are going to be a lot more okay with that.
I think the playing field has changed too in the past 3 years, 4 years, with Facebook, with Twitter, with you know, there are 100 million more people on the internet now than there were last year or 2 years ago. I mean, the numbers keep growing, and I really believe that, you know, because of the way our society has shifted to digital media and all this stuff, we're willing to. If somebody handed you an iPad 2 today and said, Would you take this, but you have to deal with ads across the bottom all the time? Who would take one? I would. You know, my point is, I think our society has accepted advertising. We're willing to go pay $10 to see a movie that is 80% funded by product placement, and we watch TV. You know, so again, I don't think the conversation, and this is something I had to keep thinking about when I did my first sponsored post. It's like, I don't think anybody's going to notice this. We disclosed it. Nobody said boo. Whereas 2 years ago, when we threw up our first ad, it was like, what are you guys doing, selling out? I hate you. You know, but on our sponsored post for Groupon 2 weeks ago, thanks for posting about these carts. I bought a Groupon. It was great. So again, I think the culture has shifted from when we all started the blogging. And you know, I remember one of my first posts back in the day, I wrote something about shoes I was wearing, and I linked to, I don't know, Keen or something like that back in the day, and somebody left a comment on my personal blog like, "Are you shilling for Keen now?" I'm like, "What?" No, but my point is, now if I wrote that, nobody would care. So, my opinion. So.
Now, so, you know, going back to almost to Jonathan's comment about thinking through your audience, going back to maybe the circling up to the startup again, do you recommend, you know, knowing that all of your sites kind of grew organically, and that's a good percentage of people out there, do you recommend people think through their startup, saying, I want to actually figure out what the audience is first, and if that's a monetizable audience, and then, you know, go from there, and we'll work back to that as a business practice. But
I think it's something to keep in mind. It's a big factor in deciding to do it, but ultimately, if you don't really love what you're going to write about or really care about it, then I don't think it's going to work anyway. So.
Yeah, You got to have the passion first.
Yeah.
It's if you're trying to think about, I want to write and I want to make money, and you don't, and did it the other opposite of what we all did, which was start with a hobby. You have to start with a passion, but then you can look at the what's going on in the marketplace. Are other people doing it? Do they have an audience? Are people interested? And then you can start asking the business questions about, okay, how can I tweak this passion so that I can make it something that's attractive? But it's not going to work unless you're passionate about it.
I mean, there are plenty of other methods of generating revenue on the web through content which is not original. So, again, like if somebody wants to have a food cart site that is, makes money right off the bat, just create a directory, in your city, and then I go out and I buy all the websites. So, I don't.
I don't know. I guess I'm the ruthless mercenary on the panel because I think it depends on what your capacity for pain tolerance is and how long you want to be working 2 jobs and duking it out with the bills and that kind of thing. And what your goal is. If your goal primarily is to do something that is of interest or that's more hobbyist and that's all you ever really want to do with it, then I don't think it's necessary to think about the business constraints of it. But if you're starting it with the idea in mind that this is going to be something I'm going to really pour 20 hours a week into, and I'm going to come to this point where I have to make a decision about, like, is this viable or do I need to give it up? You risk burning yourself out on the passion of the hobby or blogging when you reach a critical financial point where you can't make it work because you weren't engineering it to be a business in the first place. And I think with a lot of just our regular startups, not necessarily blogging or content focused, when they're doing concurrent customer development with product or service development, it's just a more stable project. So that's my point of view on that.
Yeah, and I mean, do you folks run into people who just like, you're talking about, selling out, being a reaction you get. People who just feel like you should just be doing it for pure ideological reasons, and any kind of business concession is like tampering with its moral purity, and you just, do you have to like deal with that?
Not anymore.
No.
Not anymore.
No, we never, when we made the transition, we never ran into that.
So there are some common axioms of like blogging success. One is like daily postings. Are there some other ones that you found, some techniques that you were able to share with the universe that work for you?
I think, if there's one thing, it's seeing comments as having equal value as the content that you write, and that's something I've always thought really since day one, is that, and understanding that the people that comment on my site are most of the time smarter than I am, and not having this big sort of, and I think this is something a lot of traditional media outlets get wrong, is that there's like, they're in the pearly gates of the castle, and then you got all the public out like the peasants, right, and there's this weird vibe. So I think building that community, and you can go to seminars and try to learn, well, how you to build community. Well, if you just respect people that come to your site and you don't put up a lot of walls for them to interact, and you go in there too and interact, I think dealing with comments and like being really serious about comments, it also drives traffic and it drives brand value and all that stuff. So from a business perspective, from a just quality perspective, I think comments are the biggest sort of part of that.
And this is Comment King. You get over 100 comments a post usually, is what I see.
Not usually, but
okay.
Everyone's-
I get 3 to 4. When I went into food carts from the city blogging, that was one of the tenets of building a community, is to engage the comments, and I did for a year, and it didn't make a difference. The commenting for us is happening over on Facebook. We launched Facebook about 1.5 years ago. Much to the chagrin of me, I was like, I don't like Facebook. No, I don't like, and it was a Friday night, and my wife's like, just do it. And a week later, we had 1,000 followers. A month later, we had 5,000, and now we're 32,000. That's where our comments are happening. I can't monetize Facebook, but Facebook drives 15% of my traffic. So again, that's for me is how I manage the customers. I try to engage, but again, I only engage if it gets nasty. And it happens. People have opinions about food. Also, like one of the other things, post what the audience wants to see. They love seeing a giant, nasty hamburger. It's awesome. Or the burrito that's the size of your arm. So.
Oh, can you repeat the question again? Where would it be?
Well, do you have like an axiom, not an axiom, but just like a technique that you find that works for you, as you know, has built some of your success? Whether that's just remember to post new headlines, photos every day, or engage with the comments. The comments are content. Or remember social media. You can't monetize it, but it's going to build your traffic.
Yes.
You have some of those. Good. What are
All of the above. And on top of that, though, one of the things I think we've done that fits for what we do is physically going out and engaging the community. By that meaning going and talking to the businesses. A lot of sourcing for our stories comes from me, when I'm shooting a story, taking a few minutes to talk to the business owner and saying, hey, what's going on in the neighborhood? What's going on in the community here? That sort of thing. That creates, you know, a lot of goodwill and builds those relationships with those people so that they start to trust you, they start to give you more tips and leads and that sort of thing. But it also builds awareness out in the community at a very grassroots level. That's really a big one, and I can't tell you how much it's really, really helped us.
One thing I would add is too the importance of if you have a blog that has, or of a site that has like one person that's making most of the content. I think earned media is a huge thing. And I came from PR where that was my business. Is I would help people, you know, establish themselves as experts. I would help authors with their book kind of stuff and make them the expert on this topic or that topic or that topic. So that's something I kept with me from day one in terms of like, you could get a lot of value out by getting in front of the media. So I always respond to TV station, print, everybody that wants to talk about bicycling.
Yeah.
It's like I work hard to make sure that like they call me to talk about it because then I'm in front of their audience and that helps, you know, the business and gets the name out there, and you know, so that's kind of like marketing and you know, for me. So
Yep. We were on Fox News last week. That caused a lot of fun comments in Portland.
One comment that I have on that is just automation. I think what's really lovely about all the different forms of social media is like we set up, there's so many widgets that plug back in. So like our WordPress blog is linked in to our Facebook account, which then reposts it to Facebook, which then feeds it into TweetDeck and all these different things. And so I forget that it does that, and so we'll post like a photo of an event that we did at Portland 10, and then I'm at another event in the community. Someone's like, "Oh yeah, I saw that like silly photo of whatever," and I'm like, I don't remember that. I remember how you got access to that, and it's so automated at this point that really, I think that's critical in managing community. So.
Yeah, 'cause how do you manage all those networks at once?
Yeah.
I
So
wanted to
I
open
actually-
this up to questions on the
Okay.
floor. So we started kind of late, so I'm hoping we'll have a little wiggle room. I'm sorry that it's taken so long.
Do you advertise on other sites, and where do you advertise? On other people's sites?
Does anybody?
I mean, I do, yeah, with people pulling in RSS headlines and running our headlines on their site. I mean, not traditional advertising though, but no, I don't send the banner around, but everybody that's pulling in the story excerpts is essentially advertising for us.
I advertise on our sister site in New Orleans.
Who now?
We haven't gotten any advertising on any of their sites. It's just not in the budget yet.
Cornelius, repeat the question for the video, please.
Oh, the question was, do they advertise on any other sites? I'm gonna work on this one.
A comment and a question. The comment about, we were talking about product placement. I mean, I'm sure everybody's aware of the FTC rules. You've got to disclose now if you're reviewing something you were given and so on. So that's a real change. But my question is for Jonathan. How the heck do you get somebody comments? Because I'm in a situation where people are commenting. I put out my blog post. I have these great comments on Facebook, or somebody comes up to me in the street and just wants to say, "Can't you just comment on my blog so I can see?"
There's a lot of factors to that. I mean, for one thing, I'm working in something that people care a lot about in terms of the advocacy piece and the emotion around the subject matter that I work around is big. It's a big thing. People respond to it differently than they'll respond to just other kind of news. The other thing too is like, my site was really established before social media started happening. So I think there's a large crop of our audience who's just more comfortable and used to commenting on the website. And the other thing is, like I said, since I treat them so seriously and I have the utmost respect for the comments, which is absolutely not the case with a lot of outlets, because of that, people appreciate that. So they have respect. So you build that respect time over time over time. I mean, I spent a lot of time during my day, depending on the story and what way things are going, but on the comments. Editing people's comments, deleting ones that aren't appropriate. I mean, it's a whole thing. You know, it's part of the business. If you do that time and time again, people start to care. And also, it's a matter of like, if you have a demonstrated impact with your stories, people know that that's a stump they can stand on to get some attention for themselves. You know, and that happens a lot. And another big thing is, one thing I've done concertedly, purposely, is I've encouraged the newsmakers and the policy people and the politicians or whoever, I've always encouraged them to come in and comment. You know, which is, you know, it's good to have relationships with a lot of different people, so it's, I can just send an email and say, hey, you know, you're getting killed over here in these comments, or hey, it'd be great if you would, you know, I just posted a story about your thing, it'd be great if you can maybe answer people's questions. So then if you're just a regular person reading that, and you see, you know, someone from the city or someone that is in the news story commenting, it gives you a big, you get really excited about that. So again, you're fostering that whole thing, so, yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, there, okay. We should- We've been talking about making money with advertising. Are there any other revenue sources that you're using to bring money in?
Other than sponsored
Than
content?
just ads or sponsored content?
I've done some writing.
Did you hear the question? The question was, is there any other revenue sources or revenue models other than advertising and sponsored content?
I've done some writing for some books here in Portland and beyond, and been paid for that. I have done some consulting to the food carts and to people who want to start food cart lots, and I did some event consulting last year. So yeah, it's not on a regular basis, but different ways to do that.
We're working on a couple partnerships that to explain what it is that if a transaction is initiated from our site, we would then get a small percentage of that, a little fee of it. That's a different way, because then your audience is actually helping to pay for the site, but they're not paying for content. It's a window to somebody else's deal and that sort of thing.
Is that an online store kind of e-commerce model?
Yeah, I mean, it's because they're not finalized, I can't go into a great amount of detail, but it's another entity that has offerings that people can handle online. And so basically, there's a widget on Neighborhood Notes, or there hopefully will be soon, widget on Neighborhood Notes that the link takes you to a deal. Well, that transaction can be tracked, and then ultimately we would get a small percentage of that transaction. So that is another way to go. And that's, I mean, we see sponsored content and that kind of thing as much more the way we're going to generate revenue than banner ads. Even though banner ads, you know, the latest I saw, there's been, online advertising received more than newspapers, I think, the first time last year. And even in that, banners still grew. But I really think that these kinds of models are going to be really significant in the long term.
So no t-shirts, no ebooks?
Oh yeah, I do t-shirts too, yeah.
I've done t-shirts a couple times, but it's just really not worth the time. I thought I was going to have like a postcard empire with all my photos, and I realized I had to sell 50,000 postcards a month to like make as much as one banner or something, you know? So it's not really worth all the little gifts and items I haven't found worth the time. We're unfortunately really absolutely primarily just traditional paid content, banners and stuff, and trying to diversify that, but it's not super easy. I have a growing revenue of selling photographs. We do job listings and event listings, which Ken does too. But you know, at this point, I'm looking for more sort of investors and other people, more like underwriters, people that say, you know, hey, if we cover this kind of stuff, would you be willing to just, you know, have a little shout out at the end, or maybe creating an editorial fund where people could then invest in that, you know? So yeah, I mean, in my case, I think I've reached sort of almost a ceiling in terms of what I can do given the amount of content I can create and how much money I can make from it, you know? I think so. That's why I'm trying to think like, what's the next thing?
Well, the photo licensing too is something on our radar. Being a photographer, I generate a lot. We just haven't, I mean, there's so much bandwidth, and setting up that whole process has to wait until we reach some other benchmarks. So but that could be another way that we could do it, because I know Bike King here, but I do have a wide range of photos from around the city that are all sitting there that are valuable, but it's just bandwidth to actually get them out there and market that side of it.
I have the You Can Hash cheeseburger photo.
Awesome.
I'd like to go back to the question about dealing with people's comments. The kinds of blogs you guys have are relatively uncontroversial compared to, say, hot button issues that are covered by the news. You know, on the Word of Life website, the Stump, it's pretty disturbing to see the comments that they allow to get on there.
Right.
And that they're very good lettering. I mean, they don't really do much editing as far as I can tell.
Exactly.
Maybe, but still, there's a lot of really very letters and very inflammatory things that get published on that website.
I agree, and I think we've covered tons and tons of controversy and tragedy and political mess ups and very, 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 very serious stuff over the years. I mean, I've been subpoenaed into court for comments that have happened and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I mean, the reason they're still valuable and they haven't gone south and turned into like the Stump is because, like I said, I care about them and I spend time managing them for real. You know, it's not just like hire some intern to go make sure. You know, it's like, no, that's really serious stuff. You know, so.
So it sounds like it's requires a great deal of time.
It does, yeah. It takes a great deal of time, and the thing I've learned at the other outlets I know is that they simply don't care about them as much. They don't think that they're valuable, so then they're not going to institutionally put resources behind them. But what they need to do is start doing that. Like I mean, if I had a big news organization, I would make that someone's job to be like the comment person. You know, I mean, it's that important. And amazingly, a lot of people just don't get that.
Let's take one more question, if there is one.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the role of photography, about how you've prioritized it, whether you have or not, and whether you feel it adds value to your sites.
Throwing me a softball.
Real quick down the line.
For me, it's like
up next door. So.
Easy. It is a priority. When we did the survey that I talked about, readers liked a lot of photography. I'm a photographer, so I'm going to put my stuff out there. But seriously, it is a priority for us because we think it really enhances the stories, especially when you're trying to talk about some of the conceptual things going on in neighborhoods. The photography is needed to illustrate what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's of the utmost importance. It always has been for me. That's why I spend a lot of time doing it. And I've invested quite a bit in it too, in terms of equipment. I mean, we're a pretty lean operation, but my camera budget's really high. I think it's really important. I mean, I'm in the news publishing business. I mean, to me, my competitors are like the New York Times, the Oregonian, whoever. And it's like, they have really good photos, they care about it, so I should probably care about it too.
Yeah.
Ditto. People love to see pictures of food. And I'm not a photographer. I do not have equipment. I have this. And yet photos from this have been on CNN, New York Times, Guardian UK. Because they're like, hey, can we borrow that photo? I'm like, sure, just put my name on it. And so yeah, I try to, you know, when you're talking about food, you gotta have a photo. Sir,
Food porn.
food porn.
That's it again? She's talked about it twice. I'd like to thank everyone for having an interest in this. I hope that you guys learned something or found something useful. I'd like to thank Carolyn of Portland 10. I'd like to thank Oregonian News Network partners, Ken from Neighborhood Notes, Jonathan from Bike Portland, and Brett from, who's not a partner, but from Food Cart Portland. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.